Government exams have come to be seen as one of the most lucrative and one of the most sought after career options out there in the market. In the year 2019 alone, 8.5 lakh people took the UPSC exams. And guess how many people actually made it? 1,000 people. Now, if you do the math right, the acceptance rate turns out to be around 0.0011, which makes UPSC exams one of the most toughest exams out there in the world. In this episode of Keeping It Simple with Hardik, I have with me Jitendra Nath Misra sir. He is an IFS officer of the batch 1982 and he has served in 11 countries. Over the span of his career, he has done several roles. He has been an ambassador to Portugal and consul general to the Ho Chi Minh City amongst various other roles. He is also visiting faculty to many of the universities around the globe like the Georgetown University, University of Lisbon, University of Vietnam, and of course our very own Jamia Millia Islamia. He also has a PhD in international politics and international relations, and that is why he's one of the most sought after people when it comes to TV debates. Have you ever pondered over questions like, why is India and Pakistan always fighting? Is boycott China actually possible? Why did India give out $1.4 billion to the Maldives in 2018? Is life chill after clearing UPSC exam? If your answers to the above questions is yes, you are surely going to love this episode. But if your reaction to the above questions is even then I can assure you that you are going to love this episode because Jitendra Nath sir has laid out some of the best and most fundamental values and the virtues that you should really possess if you want to make it big in any career. So without any further ado, let's talk to the man himself, Jitendra Nath sir. Hello everyone, I have with me the man himself, Jitendra Nath Misra sir. Really honored to have you on the show, sir.
Thank you very much, Hardik. It's a great pleasure being with you with such a bright young mind.
I would like to begin this interview by asking, how exactly did your day look like while you were an ambassador? I mean, were you meeting with all the top diplomats and having all those meetings, or was it more like a desk job?
Well, ambassadors' jobs are not desk jobs at all, though they have to spend a considerable amount of time on the desk analyzing things and writing reports. That's a very important part of the work. But the day usually begins with a review of what you need to do, a short review, and a meeting with your colleagues, with your staff, with your officers, and then you assign tasks quickly or you review things, what you have done in the past 1 week or the previous days. And after that, it's very, very important to read the newspapers. This is very important, and the information from the media, other media platforms. You get all that information and you must find out what's going on in the country to which you are accredited. The domestic politics and the economic developments, the social cultural developments, and other things that are happening in the country. So that is very important because it gives you an insight into what that country's foreign policy is likely to be, because foreign policy is a function of domestic politics. Ultimately, all foreign policy depends on the domestic politics of a country. So that's what it is. And then, of course, you move out of the office. It's very important to meet people, to connect with people. Nowadays, it's virtual, but it's actual meetings that we do. And people think that ambassadors socialize a lot, they have a great time, and they are partying, and they drink wine, and they eat very good food. Well, it's a job for us. That is our job. That's not something we do for pleasure as ambassadors. We do that with our families, privately, or with our friends, but not when we are in the public space. So that's a very important part of our work because we are talking to people, we are finding out what's going on, we are checking information that we read in the media with people whom we meet and whom we trust, and people who are knowledgeable, people who are willing to talk to us, whether they are other ambassadors, other diplomats, or whether they are people from the professions, the elites of the country, politicians, and the media people, the people in the arts, scholars, intellectuals, professors, all kinds of things. So that's a very, very important part of our work. So it's a mix of going out and meeting people and sitting in the office and analyzing and processing the information that you have. And most importantly, reporting back to your government.
So that must have like not a desk job at all, right? Must have been a lot of interaction and moving around.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I always used to tell my colleagues, my younger colleagues who joined the Foreign Service, who were training under me, with me, not under me, and whom I was trying to tell about my experiences. And I used to tell them that travel is very important. So when you become an ambassador, don't postpone your travel. Oh, I'll do it later. Start immediately and get off the blocks as quickly as possible. You must travel the length and breadth of the country to which you are accredited, because everything that happens in the capital city is not what happens in the rest of the country. So you must find out different perspectives. And sometimes you find that people are very busy in the capital cities and people are more accessible. People who are influential in the government, mayors, for example, are much more accessible in other cities. For example, when I was in Lisbon, getting meetings and doing things in Lisbon was far harder than getting meetings and getting things done in the other cities. So you must travel, and everything counts. Every meeting, every interaction, every economic seminar you do, everything counts and ultimately contributes to the national effort of India.
So getting back to your UPSC days, what compelled you to start preparing for UPSC exams? I mean, a lot of people nowadays have start preparing for UPSC exams because they feel they have a point to prove or they have faced a rejection. I mean, there's even a movie based on that. So what compelled you to start preparing for UPSC exams in the very first place?
Well, the reason was partly because in my family, my brother and my brother in law, both of them were in the IAS, in the Indian Administrative Service, direct recruits. They went through the recruitment process, through a very fair process. So that obviously was a great motivation for me, and it was in a way part of the family. It was in the family. I had been very familiar with very senior officers in the IAS for a long time. And my brother-in-law, Dr. Ramakanta Ratha, who is my guru and mentor in many ways, he once told me that if you had a choice between joining the IAS and the Foreign Service, what would you do? I said, well, I can't decide. What is your advice? He said, I think you should join the Foreign Service because you are intellectually and mentally and temperamentally more cut out for that, not for the rough and tumble of the administrative service. So then I started preparing. But I can tell you a little secret also. And that secret is that it was not my first choice career. I wanted to be a great scholar, an author, a writer, and a professor. And in fact, indeed, in the year 1979, I joined Jamia Millia Islamia University in Delhi, and I got the appointment through a very fair process. And then I was there in the job for 1 year. But as those days, a career in the academic field was very difficult. I mean, the money, the lifestyle, all those things, and the job security. It was a job only for a year. So my parents told me that they were elderly. They said you have to get married and you have to um, have a proper job and get settled, and you have a brother and a brother-in-law in the IAS, so you should take the exam. And so I came under, I wouldn't say pressure, but as a mark of respect for my parents, respectfully, I said, okay, I'll do this. and that's how I got into the career. But of course, I never regretted it, because representing your country as the ambassador is a tremendous challenge and a tremendous responsibility.
So, if there's something we Indians just love talking about, that is India and Pakistan. So, why do you think the animosity exists between India and Pakistan? I mean, I feel we have, like, from the past 18 years that I have lived, we have never been on good terms, and I believe even from a really long time. Why do you think that is happening?
Well, go back to history. I don't look at the relationship in terms of what is happening now, but in terms of history. You see, the Pakistani state, I'm not talking about the Pakistani people, ordinary people are the same everywhere. They just want to get on with life. They are not hostile to us. But the Pakistani state structure is India's other. It is based on the philosophy that I am a Pakistani because I am not an Indian. Now, if Iranians cease to be Muslim, or Egyptians cease to be Muslim, or Turks cease to be Muslim, they would still be Iranians, Egyptians, or Turks, because their national history and identity comes from millennia. It comes from before Islam. But with Pakistan, if you take out Islam from the equation, then what are you? You are confused about your identity. So it's a question of the identity and the fact that Pakistan is founded on the principle, which I think is terribly flawed, that religion constitutes a separate nationhood. Just because you have a particular religion, you have a separate nation. Whereas I believe that religion is important, but it's personal piety, it's a personal matter. What is more important is memory and history and culture and language and literature and music and the arts and the cuisine. That's fundamentally more important to your identity than just your matter of belief. But Pakistan has put the belief system on the pedestal. And that belief system, unfortunately, is supremacist. Because Pakistanis regard themselves as descendants of conquerors who conquered and subdued Hindus and Indians and the pre-Islamic people of India. So Pakistan's history books teach them that Pakistan really begins not with the Indus Valley civilization, but begins with the Arab invasion of Sindh in 712 AD, when Muhammad bin Qasim defeats Raja Dahir, and Islamic rule begins in India, in the subcontinent. And then, of course, it takes centuries for Islam to find a more permanent stronghold in India to the east. So that is a very problematic narrative for Indians, because we believe that religion is something personal, but religion and nationality are different things. We can perfectly coexist as a multilingual and a multi-ethnic and a multi-religious country, but as one nation, because we eat the same food, we dream the same dreams, we worship the same gods. And by that I mean that if the Pakistanis claim that the Taj Mahal is theirs and the Lal Killa is their history because it is Islamic history, I have every right to claim the Buddhist heritage, not just of Pakistan, but of Afghanistan, like Bamiyan. It pained me when the Bamiyan Buddhas were destroyed by the Taliban, because that's part of my DNA. And therefore, the Hindu and Buddhist sites in Pakistan and Harappa and Mohenjo-daro as part of my heritage, as much as the Pakistanis can claim Islamic monuments in India to be part of their heritage. I would go a step further. As an Indian, I can claim even the Badshahi Mosque of Lahore as part of my heritage, because Islam is now a part of my DNA as an Indian, because Islam has had a very deep impact on Indian history, and it's not something that we can wish away. So we are able to include all elements, all belief systems into our ethos and into our conception of nationalism, whereas the Pakistanis focus it in a very narrow way in terms of Islam, and that is problematic. So it's very difficult for these two countries to coexist, to find a modus vivendi, a kind of basis for peaceful coexistence without recurrence of conflicts. And Kashmir, of course, is only a symptom of that conflict.
So, do you feel that like any country which has been formed on the basis of religion can go on to become a good and a developed nation?
Well, Israel, where I worked, also is based on religion. But that is a little different from Pakistan. The only country that comes close to Pakistan where religion defines nationhood is Israel. But Israel is still a democratic country. The non-Jewish people in Israel and the Arabs, the Palestinian Arabs, ethnic Arabs who are Israeli, who live in Israel, the people of Arab origin, Palestinian origin, they are 20% of the population and the fastest growing group ethnically. So if there's persecution against them, how come they are growing fast? The same thing we can say about the number of Muslims in India. If there is so much of persecution, how come the numbers are going up? You are allowing them space to grow. Simple. So Israel is not comparable, also because it is a democratic country where everybody has rights. In Pakistan is institutionally supremacist. It is based on Islamic supremacist principles, institutionally and constitutionally. Whereas in Israel, it is different because everybody has space under the political system of Israel. And don't forget that Israel allows Jewish people facing persecution historically, such as the Ashkenazi Jews in Europe or the Sephardic Jews of North Africa. They allows them even today to come into Israel and adopt Israeli nationality without condition. But Pakistan has no time and rejects even the people, the most Pakistani of the Pakistanis, who are the so-called Bihari Muslims, who are trapped in Bangladesh after the liberation of Bangladesh. Even today they say we are not Bangladeshi, we are Pakistani, because we fought for the Pakistani idea. They were the people who migrated from Bihar into Pakistan at the time of independence, at the time of partition. And the most Pakistani of Pakistanis are the people for whom Pakistan has no need and no space. So its espousal of Islam is also problematic politically. It cannot take more Muslims. It refuses to take more Muslims. So that's how it is different from Israel. They are similar, but they are also different.
Do you feel that we can have a very cordial relationship with Pakistan someday in the future? And do you feel that diplomatic talks are the way to go forward?
Oh, absolutely, because otherwise diplomats would be out of jobs. If diplomats have nothing to do, if there are no diplomatic talks, what will happen to folks like us? You see, but jokes apart, the reality is that as a diplomat, I will always argue that we must absolutely never shut the door completely. Right now, we don't have a dialogue process with Pakistan because of cross-border terrorism, and we have made it amply clear, and we have a very consistent policy under this government in India that without a stop to cross-border terrorism, there will be no talks. No talks with terror, period. But it doesn't mean that we don't engage Pakistan. We are engaging them on Kulbushan Jadhav. For example, we did engage them on the coronavirus crisis. Of course, the Pakistanis came on board rather late, but they did come on board when the Prime Minister invited all the SAARC countries to join a common initiative. So it's not as if we have shut all doors, because it's not practical, and we are perfectly willing to deal with Pakistan, whether they have a civilian government or they have a military government. It doesn't matter at all. We are perfectly agreeing to deal with them, because for us it's a vitally important country, because we have a conflictual situation with them. So I will argue that, of course, we must keep trying. We must keep trying to narrow down our differences and work very hard. Both sides will need to work very hard to hope that one day we can have greater strategic stability in the relationship, if not great cordiality. But without stability, there is no cordiality. First, you have to decrease the elements of conflict and you have to calm down things over a more extended period of time. And Pakistan must eschew, must give up terrorism as an instrument of state policy. It's not going to get them anywhere. The best years of the Indian economy were the years when they unleashed terrorism against India. So it's not working out. And now they're isolated. We wish them well, and we feel that the Pakistani people are perfectly willing and able to reach understanding with India if the state system changes its attitude.
You just mentioned Kulbushan Jadhav. I was about to come to that. What do you think is preventing India from getting Kulbushan Jadhav back to our country? And how right is it of Pakistan to have him in their country locked against his will?
Well, we took the case to the International Court of Justice, as you know, and they ruled that Pakistan must allow consular access to India, meaning that our consular officials from our High Commission in Islamabad must have access. They have tried to have unhindered access, but it hasn't worked. Every time the Pakistanis interfere and eavesdrop on conversations and even record the conversations. So we haven't had that kind of access. And I read that they have now allowed unhindered access. I don't know the facts, but that's very important. And the second thing is that he must have a fair trial. He has been accused of espionage, which he vehemently rejected. And in fact, India has rejected that also, that he was picked up by the Pakistani agencies as an excuse to make an example. And so he must have a fair trial. Now, he's under the current order of things, he is to be tried under the military courts of Pakistan. But India would definitely want a civilian trial. I don't know whether that's going to happen. And his life, of course, has been in danger. And after the matter went to the ICJ, India took it to ICJ. The Pakistanis have calmed matters a little bit, but just a little bit. So we don't know how it's going to end. It's not so easy to just get him out because there is a legal process that has to be completed.
Okay. Do you feel so a lot of countries like America, they give out funds to other nations, and for that matter even India gave out 1.4 billion US dollars to the Maldives in 2018 because they were in a lot of debt. Why do countries help each other out, and is it because the more the money they give, the more the say they have in the functioning of the government?
Well, you could say that in terms of realpolitik and narrow national interest, yes, you have initiatives where you give aid to countries and you influence their policies. China is doing that through the Belt and Road and the so-called China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which goes through Pakistani-occupied Kashmir, the part of Kashmir now currently occupied by Pakistan. We vehemently oppose that because of sovereignty issues. But Pakistan has increasingly come under Chinese influence, and it has to be a matter of great worry to us because of the crisis we are facing in our relationship with China. And you are aware of the northern borders, in the borders of Ladakh, the eastern, northeastern borders, the western sector of the China-Indian border. So yes, nations give aid to influence others, but I think the time has come during the coronavirus crisis for nations to come together and to make some more genuine efforts, not just in terms of their narrow self-interest, but in terms of the interests of the common good, the common interests of all the nations, to come forward and try to have a common fund, a common COVID fund. You know, the G20 finance ministers meeting took place in Riyadh, the virtual meeting on Saturday, just a few days ago, and our our Finance Minister, Madam Nirmala Sitaraman, was there.
Okay.
So that definitely it will happen. And in fact, the vulnerable countries have now the debt is $92 million a day. They are servicing debt of $92 million a day, according to Oxfam. And the debt suspension initiative of the G20 is now $5.3 billion for the year 2020. They're trying to freeze the debts of countries. And I'm going into this because you asked about cooperation, whether it is just narrow-minded cooperation for self-interest or something more philanthropic and genuinely that is for the common good of the world. And now this is 12% of the debt payment due in the year 2020 of the most vulnerable countries after the corona crisis. 12% relief of debt suspension, not write-off, but suspension has taken place. But they have to do 100% for the year as targeted by the G20 countries. Now here there is an opportunity, and I would like to ask China, why have you done the things you have done? You have actually exploited the crisis, used the crisis and the problems that it has caused in the rest of the world to make your territorial claims, to aggressively make territorial claims, whether it is the South China Sea, whether it is the trade war with Australia, whether it's Hong Kong, Taiwan, and of course India. So China, as the number 2 economy in the world and a very important member of the G20, has a great opportunity to do something for the common good. But will they do it? That's the big question. So here is an example of a country acting in narrow self-interest.
So talking about China, if there's any word that's been making a lot of rounds recently, apart from Corona, is China and boycott China and all that. But for a country like India, which is going down in terms of economy and the GDP is down right now, and even prior to the Corona pandemic, do you think it's feasible for the Indian government to totally boycott Chinese products?
Oh, absolutely not. And I don't think that's a good idea because it will be hurting ourselves. We don't need to hurt ourselves. We need to be smart, like 5G, like the ban of the apps. These are things that actually hurt China. Remember that China's exports to India are only 3% of China's global exports. 3%. So we don't have that kind of leverage. Even if we stop the 3%, they still will be able to export the 97%. So we will not be able to make that dent. And don't forget the supply chains, the global supply chains. China is a very important part of our supply chain. For example, raw material for drugs and pharmaceuticals. You know that, don't you? We need Chinese raw materials for our drug and pharmaceutical industry. And for generic drugs, India is number 1 in the world in generic drugs, in export of generic drugs. So by boycotting China, we'll be actually hurting ourselves. So we have to be smart, we have to be selective, we should not be emotional, we should not act in a hurry and act on impulse, but act in enlightened self-interest.
Okay, coming to the last question of this interview, how has your journey as a diplomat and in working in the Department of Foreign Service been like?
Well, it has been a very productive journey. It has been a great journey, and it has been a great honor, as I mentioned earlier, to serve your country. When you are an ambassador and you are presenting the credentials to the president of the receiving state, it's an onerous responsibility. It's a great challenge, it's a great responsibility, and it's a great opportunity. What do you make of that? So it's a great test of your strength of character, of your ability, of your integrity, financial integrity, moral integrity, in every sense of the term, and your patriotism, your commitment to the nation, and your capacity to allow your self-interest, your narrow interest, to recede into the background in search of something far more lofty and something far more fulfilling, which is to serve your motherland. So I will say that it has been a tremendous journey. The other thing is that a lot of people don't realize it who haven't done it. I have lived in 11 countries, and living in a country is very different from traveling to a country as a tourist. When you live in a country, you have a much deeper knowledge of that country in terms of culture, arts, cuisine, literature, philosophy, politics, economics, everything, full spectrum. So you understand that country and you develop some empathy for the culture of that country. So you become an international citizen. It has opened so many vistas, so many avenues, and it has given me so many opportunities. I consider myself so fortunate that I had the capacity to try and understand and accept something that is different from my own culture, to understand and accept other cultures, to develop not just tolerance, but to celebrate other cultures. And it's happening in my family. My son in law, for example, is Israeli Canadian, and my daughter in law is Sri Lankan Canadian. So there you are. So I have two members in my family, my own immediate family. I could accept that because I had the opportunity to respect and celebrate different cultures which came from being in the foreign service. A great opportunity to serve the country and a great opportunity to grow as a human being.
So, do you have any regrets or maybe some things that you have wanted to do it differently?
Well, those are little secrets I think I'll keep to myself. But jokes apart, we always have some regrets, Hardik, in life, don't we? I
Yeah.
could have done it differently. When I was a younger man, I think I could have been more patient. I wanted outcomes in my job. I worked very hard, but I wanted outcomes very quickly. And sometimes I ended up, you could say, you end up having people not being able to move at the same pace that you want to move. So this creates some kind of dissonance and some kind of lack of harmony. You could say that when
Yes.
others are not moving at your pace. And I think I was a very tough taskmaster as a boss when I was much younger. And today, when I look at people like you at the age of 18 doing wonderful things, I say that the world is a beautiful place. Let everybody grow. Let everybody achieve his own potential. Let everybody be happy. Accept them as they are, not as you want them to be. So I think that's one of the big lessons I've learned from life.
It's been a really wonderful opportunity for me and a lot of viewers as well to learn from a man of your level and I really hope that a lot of viewers who are aspiring UPSC aspirants or anybody who want to make it big in their career would surely be inspired from your life, sir.
Thank you very much, and God bless you.
Thank you, sir. Hey everyone, I really hope you liked this episode, and if you did, please do stay subscribed and share it with your friends. It would mean a lot to me. And also, if you want to connect with me on Instagram, I have dropped my Instagram handles in the description below. So let's stay connected and stay indoors and stay safe. Thank you.